got Queen 10 here. And we open the button. You're going to be doing this a lot in tournaments. And another thing that'll happen a lot in tournaments is you're going to get flatted by the big blind if you're opening a lot of buttons, or 3-bet by the big blinds. Now here is kind of an interesting spot. This kind of flop texture, you have top pair with kind of a marginal kicker, but there's going to be a lot of hands that someone defends from the big blind that they're going to call this type of flop with. Like, you know, any kind of 8, 8, 9, 8, 10, 8, 6, whatever. And same with the 7, 7, 9, 7, 6, 7, 10, all that crap. And then, of course, 9, 10, Jack 10 sometimes if he wants to float you. And there's going to be a lot of hands you're going to get value from. But the difference that you need to recognize is that we're on the button here, and the big blind is the big blind. And with that in mind, it changes a lot of the dynamic towards being able to value bet kind of a wider range. Whereas if I was in Paul G's spot right here and I opened and Scarface defended the big blind, I might check back this type of flop just because my range will automatically look a little bit stronger unless I had some kind of crazy image. But just because I'm under the gun, my range will look a little bit stronger than my perceived, you know, raising pretty much almost any 2 cards on the button. So my C-bets will get a lot less credit on the button, but they'll get a lot more credit under the gun. So it might be better to pod control and check back this type of flop with Queen 10 when you're really not going to get too much value from worse. I mean, you could get called by 9s or 10s or something like that still if you defend the big blind, but his range should be a little bit tighter under the gun. And I think it's a lot easier to get value on this flop from the button than if you were under the gun, and especially if there are a little bit more people in. You just kind of have to recognize that when you c-bet, when you're trying to get value from these top pair hands, you got to think of what's going to be calling you that's worse on the flop. And if there's not going to be that many hands that call you that are worse, you can always check back and kind of balance your checking back range with these top pair weak kickers. But in situations like where you're on the button here against a big blind who's defending really wide and you think they're going to call you with any pair on this flop, then you're definitely losing value by checking back. So you got to kind of realize, put someone on a range for defending, kind of think of how wide they're going to be defending your c-bet here, be it you've been c-betting a lot and they're probably going to try and mess with you, or you've just been opening a lot and they're probably going to try and mess with you. So maybe a c-bet thinner can be better. Or if you've been tight, then maybe you want to take a check back line, since you're probably not going to get value from too much worse, and the value that you can get maybe from the lower pairs or maybe bluffs that you check back, you can get on later streets anyway. So here, I think I did decide to c-bet just because I had a pretty bad image at this time, and like I said, it was button versus big blind, and I made it a little bit more than half pot, but I think anywhere from half pot to 2/3 pot is an ideal size to c-bet in tournaments. I don't really think you ever really need more than 2/3 pot as a c-bet, and you should definitely lower your c-bet size once you get down to lower stack sizes, when it's just not necessary to make it 2/3 and you can just change all your c-bets to half pot, just because there's not that much behind and you're still going to be able to get all the stacks in on the river if you do half pot it. So I decided to c-bet here, and I think I took it down maybe, yeah. So that's just a little information on this type of flop. I mean, it's a pretty dry flop, and there's not so much that's going to call you that's worse, but there are hands that will call you that are worse, but you just got to make the distinction of whether you want that on the turn or the river, when they're probably still going to give you value, whereas if you bet now and they have the higher end of their range, it's going to put you in a tough spot when you're making the pot a bit bigger. So next hand here, we open ace-jack under the gun, and you definitely can fold ace-jack under the gun full ring with a bunch of good players at your table, but I just decided not to. And we get this type of flop, and I think this might be a type of flop where a lot of people just kind of check fold to people that are flatting them when they're out of position. But you've got to realize, especially in this position, this is something that there's a few more spots that are going to come up where you're opening under the gun and you get flatted and you're out of position. you really should be taking advantage when you open under the gun and you don't hit the flop or whatever, of trying to run some plays and try and put someone on a range and figure out what line you can take post flop that'll get them to fold, just because you have a lot more. You should be getting a lot more credit for opening here under the gun full ring when there's no antes in and all that. So I chose to see right here, not only for that reason, that I might try and take it away on a later street, but he's still going to have so many hands for flatting this deep that are just going to fold this flop, putting me on some kind of overpair for c-betting this board. You know, he could fold, I mean, he might flat sixes or whatever, but any pair that's lower to the board is going to fold, and then all his overcards are going to fold. And if he just flats this c-bet instead of raising, I don't really put him on I don't really put him on a set, since we're pretty deep and he'd probably raise a set here. So if he does do something like flat and some other cards come off, like either overcards or maybe even just like a deuce and then maybe another deuce, you can just keep betting big, and he's just likely not going to have more than one pair ever, and you're under the gun, so you have a much stronger range and you can easily get him to fold a good amount of the time if you balance it right and make some solid bet sizing. So that's just another kind of spot here. Just because it's kind of like a wet board here and you don't really hit it and he could hit it, doesn't mean that you should just check fold every time. I mean, obviously this is a type of flop that maybe you could check fold. You don't really want to be c-betting 100% of the time, or else it's a little bit exploitable, but this is a pretty solid spot to be c-betting. And he just folds.